My name is Carol Mangus, and I'm 31 years old. And before everything fell apart, I truly thought I understood what stability looked like. For the first time in my life, I had a future I could picture clearly, a future that felt solid. I'd spent nearly 8 years grinding, living in cramped apartments, taking on extra shifts, skipping vacations, all so I could put a down payment on a house that was mine, not inherited, not co-signed, mine. 6 months ago, I finally bought it. A 3-bedroom fixer-upper that still smelled like drywall dust and hope. The kitchen was halfway renovated. The living room had built-in shelves. I finished myself, and every wall still echoed with that strange, quiet pride you only feel when you've built something with your own hands. And in the middle of all of that, there was David, my boyfriend of 14 months. He was 28, charming in a soft-edged way, smart, funny, gentle, or at least that's who I thought he was. We'd met at a mutual friend's birthday party, the kind of chance encounter people like to romanticize. Drinks, laughter, locked eyes, the slow magnet pull towards someone who feels easy to be around. And for most of our relationship, that ease felt real. Most weekends he'd stay over. He loved the renovations, helped me choose paint colors, joked about where his toothbrush would go once we make this official someday. And I had started to believe him. I wasn't rushing anything, but his lease was ending next month. We'd been casually talking about him moving in. Nothing formal, just, wouldn't it be nice conversations that made the future feel warm? Then came the text. It was a Tuesday evening. I was kneeling on the hallway floor, rewiring a light fixture I'd been procrastinating on for weeks. The kind of domestic chore that makes you feel quietly proud of yourself for being an adult. My phone buzzed. I wiped my hands, expecting something like, "Heading home soon, babe," or "What do you want for dinner?" Instead, I saw, "Babe, great news. I'm finally ready to move in with you, but there's one thing we need to discuss. My ex-girlfriend is coming too." I stared at the screen. Once, twice, 3 times. By the 4th time, I genuinely wondered if I was hallucinating. His ex-girlfriend, Lana, the one he'd dated for 4 years, the one he was still good friends with because history doesn't just disappear. The one who commented heart emojis on his Instagram posts I pretended not to notice. The one he took late-night calls from at 11 p.m. She's going through a tough time emotionally. I'm just being supportive. That ex-girlfriend. Moving into my house, I sat down on the unfinished floorboards, the smell of fresh paint filling my lungs as my brain tried to reboot. His follow-up message made it worse. He needs a place and your house has 3 bedrooms. It makes sense. Except Lana wasn't a he. Except nothing made sense. I took a deep, grounding breath. Another. Let my pulse settle into something that wasn't disbelief-shaped panic. Then I typed 2 words that felt like ice. Interesting arrangement. I opened Zillow, screenshotted 8 decent apartment listings in the $1, $400, $1, $800 range. 2 bedrooms. Nice neighborhoods. Places David and Lana could live together if that's what he wanted so badly. And I sent them all to him. A beat later, my phone rang, his picture flashing on the screen. I answered quietly, too calm for the situation. "What plan?" he demanded the moment I picked up. "Why are you sending me apartment listings?" "They're for you and Lana," I said, "since you want to live with her so badly." There was a choking silence on the line. No, you're misunderstanding. We would all live together. You, me, and her. She'd just take the guest room. It's perfect." "For who exactly?" I asked. "For everyone," he insisted. "She's struggling. Her roommate kicked her out. She has nowhere to go. I thought you'd be supportive." "Supportive," I repeated slowly, "of my boyfriend moving his ex-girlfriend into my house. You're making it weird." "I'm making it weird," I echoed. "You just asked me to become roommates with a woman you slept with for 4 years. She's not just some woman," he snapped. "She's important to me. And if you can't handle that, maybe you're not as mature as I thought." There it was. The audacity, the entitlement, the absolute blindness to what this meant. "Here's what I can handle, David," I said evenly. "I can handle you moving in alone, or I can handle you finding a place with Lana. What I cannot and will not handle is both. Pick one." "That's not fair. You're giving me an ultimatum." "No, I'm giving you clarity." He scoffed. "She could even pay rent. She said she could do $400 a month. That would help with your mortgage." "I don't need help with my mortgage," I replied. "I need a boyfriend who understands boundaries." He hung up. Just hung up. I stared at the call-ended screen, feeling strangely steady. Maybe because deep down, some part of me had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the illusion to crack. 2 hours later, a text arrived. "You're being ridiculous. We'll talk when you've calmed down." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. because this was only the beginning. For the next 5 days, I didn't reach out to David once. Not out of spite, not out of strategy, just clarity. When someone shows you exactly who they are, the smartest thing you can do is stop squinting and pretending the picture is different. David, however, could not handle the silence. His texts came in waves, predictable, patterned, almost scripted. Day 1, 2. Can we please talk about this like adults? I think you misunderstood my intentions. I miss you. Day 3. This is so unlike you. You're being immature. My mom says you're showing your true colors. Always interesting how mothers get involved when sons make terrible choices. Day 4. My friends think you're being controlling. They say this is a red flag. David lecturing me about red flags was almost funny. Day 5, and then finally, fine, I'll tell her she can't move in. Happy now. Not I'm sorry. Not. I realize I crossed a boundary. Just a reluctant concession, as if denying his ex-girlfriend access to my home was a generous favor he was doing for me. That last text didn't give me relief, it gave me information. Information about the way he thought, about the way I ranked in his life. Still, I texted back, we should talk in person. He came over that evening. He brought a bottle of wine like this was a date night, like we were about to cuddle on the couch and watch a movie after he'd just tried to move his ex into my house. I didn't open the wine. He sat on the new couch I'd saved months for, looked around at the renovations, and smiled like everything was normal. The place looks great, Carol. Seriously, those built-ins gorgeous. Thanks, I said. Been working on it. He exhaled, leaning back casually. Look, I get why you freaked out. The way I texted it was bad. I should have talked to you first. Poor delivery, okay? My bad. That's part of it, I replied. But he continued as if this was a negotiation. You have to try and see it from my side. Lana's been my friend for years. She's had a tough month. Lost her job, roommate drama. I was just trying to help someone I care about. By moving her into your girlfriend's house, I said, keeping my voice calm, without asking. I did ask. You announced I corrected. There's a difference. He rolled his eyes. Semantics. It's really not, I said. Even if you'd asked properly, the answer would still be no. Why, though? Give me one good reason. She's your ex-girlfriend. That was years ago. You dated for 4 years. We're just friends now. And you want her living down the hall from our bedroom, I said. You don't see the problem with that. He crossed his arms, frustrated. So what, I'm supposed to abandon her, let her end up on the street? She's a grown adult. She can find alternatives that don't involve your girlfriend's house. He laughed bitterly. You're really something else. Something shifted then, a flicker in his expression, something half cruel, half dismissive. And then he said it. You don't just throw away 4 years of history because some new girl is insecure. Some new girl. Got it, I said quietly. Got what he asked. Where I rank. Don't twist my words. I'm not twisting anything I said. You told me exactly how you see this relationship. He started to backpedal immediately. That's not what I meant. But it's what you said. Silence stretched between us, sharp, cold, honest. Finally, I spoke. I think you should go. What, we're just talking. We're going in circles, I said. You still don't understand why this hurt me. You genuinely think I'm unreasonable for not wanting your ex-girlfriend living here. That tells me everything about where your head is. So you're breaking up with me, he demanded. I'm asking you to leave, I said. We can think. Maybe talk later. He stood gathering his things, muttering under his breath about me overreacting and letting insecurity win. At the door, he paused. You know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe we do need space. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable about this. He left. 3 hours later, I got a text not from him, but from his best friend. Wow, can't believe you kicked him out for trying to help someone. Real nice. He's crying. You broke him. I didn't reply. The next morning, a text from his mother. I raised my son to be compassionate. It's sad you can't appreciate that quality in him. She got my number from him, obviously, and now she was in it too. I still didn't respond, because there was nothing left to respond to. But the universe wasn't finished with me yet. Because the next evening, just as I was getting ready for bed, there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole, and my stomach turned. It wasn't David. It was Lana, his ex, standing on my porch, arms folded, expression unreadable. And that was the moment I realized this situation was about to get much, much worse. I opened the door only halfway enough to show I wasn't inviting her inside. Lana stood there underneath my porch light, wearing a cropped hoodie, messy bun, and an expression that hovered between pity and superiority. The kind people wear when they've already decided they're the reasonable one. Hi, Carol, she said, like we were acquaintances instead of two women connected by a man who had zero boundaries. Can we talk? No, I replied. Whatever you think you need to say it from there. She blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. Wow. Okay. I just wanted to clear the air. Things have gotten tense, and David's really upset. I feel like this whole thing got blown out of proportion. My jaw tightened. You mean the part where you plan to move into my house? She let out a soft laugh. See? That's the misunderstanding. It wasn't my idea. David mentioned your house had space, and I just assumed. You assumed my home was available for you, I cut in, without speaking to me, without even knowing me. She shifted her weight. I wasn't trying to intrude. I'm going through a lot right now, and David cares about me. We're close. We've always been close. I thought you'd understand. Understand that he cared about her, that she and David were close, that their 4-year relationship still anchored her life. Understand that I should step aside emotionally because she got there first. A cold clarity settled in my stomach. Here's what I understand, I said evenly. You had 4 years with him. I'm the girlfriend now. He should be building a future with me, not creating a pseudo-family arrangement with his ex-girlfriend. Lana's expression tightened. Wow, so you are insecure. The word insecure lands on women's backs like accusation weapon diagnosis. And she knew it. I took a slow breath. If defending my home and my relationship makes me insecure, then fine. Call it whatever you need to. But you're not moving in here. Not now. Not ever. Her eyes narrowed. You know, David said you were different. Chill. Mature. Not like the jealous girlfriends he's had before. Then you two clearly have different definitions of maturity. She crossed her arms. You're making him choose. That's messed up. He and I have been in each other's lives for years. You can't expect him to just throw me away because you're uncomfortable. I'm not asking him to throw you away, I said. I'm asking him to put appropriate boundaries between his past and his present. If that's something he's unable to do, then that's a problem. Lana scoffed, shaking her head. You're going to regret this. You're pushing him away. I stepped forward just enough that she took half a step back. I'm not pushing him anywhere, I said. He's choosing exactly where he wants to stand. Lana stood there for a beat like she was trying to decide whether to argue or storm off. In the end, she chose offense. This hostility is really surprising, she said. I honestly thought you'd be more evolved. Good night, Lana, I said, and closed the door before she could reply. I leaned my forehead against the wood for a moment. Not crying, not shaking, just absorbing. Because in that moment, I knew the truth. David had been telling her things about me. Soft things. Subtle things. The kind that gave her confidence to stand on my porch and call me insecure. And that realization hurt more than her words. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded with notifications. Not from Lana. From David. Are you serious right now? You were rude to her. She came over to make peace, and you treated her like trash. I stared at the message. Peace. That wasn't peace. That was a territorial visit. She showed up uninvited. At my home. Late at night. Don't twist this. David. She was being civil. You're paranoid. Why are you attacking someone who's just trying to help? Help? She wasn't trying to help. She was trying to soften me, convince me, intimidate me, or test me. I hadn't decided which yet. But then he sent the message that sealed everything. If you weren't so insecure about our friendship, none of this would be happening. I felt something inside me go still. Cold. Final. And I typed the simplest reply. I'm done. He responded instantly. What? No, you're not. You can't end things over text. That's cowardly. Watch me, I replied. And then I blocked his number. It should have ended there. A clean cut. A painful but necessary surgical removal of a man who lived with one foot in his past. But when you walk away from someone with bad boundaries, they don't just let go. Because 30 minutes later, my phone rang again from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then another number, and another. By morning, I had 12 missed calls, all from different numbers. One voicemail from his best friend. You made him cry. He never cried over anyone before. Do you know what that means? You totally broke him. You need to fix this. Then a Facebook message from David's sister. You're emotionally immature. Get therapy. Then an email. An actual email. Sent to my work address. From Lana, meaning David gave it to her. The email read, You're destroying him. I hope you realize how selfish you're being. Real relationships can handle challenges. Yours clearly couldn't. I sat back in my desk chair as the realization landed like a weight. David wasn't just boundary impaired. He was boundary absent. He had handed my work email to his ex-girlfriend so she could reprimand me for breaking up with him. It would have been laughable if it weren't so deeply alarming. I didn't reply. I didn't engage. I created a folder, saved screenshots, saved timestamps, documented everything. But the worst wasn't the messages. The worst was what happened next. 2 days later, in the middle of lunch hour, at my job, a professional open office, the receptionist called my extension. "Carol, there's someone here insisting she's your fiancé." My heart dropped. I stepped into the lobby, and there he was. David, red-eyed, disheveled, crying, lying to strangers that he was my fiancé, making a scene in front of coworkers and clients. "Carol, please," he begged loudly. "You can't just throw us away. You owe me a conversation." My boss walked over. Other coworkers gathered. People stared, and something inside me hardened into steel. "David," I said calmly, "you tried to move your ex-girlfriend into my home." I said no. You refused to accept that. Then you gave her my work email. The receptionist's eyebrows shot up. My coworkers exchanged looks. His face crumpled. "This isn't over," he whispered. But he was wrong. It was. It had been over the moment he chose her comfort over my boundaries. And as security escorted him out, my boss turned to me and said quietly, "Document everything. If this continues, you may need legal action." And I nodded because I already knew. This wasn't heartbreak. This was harassment, and it was far from done. After David showed up at my workplace pretending to be my fiancé, something in me went cold and still. Not fear, not sadness, just the kind of clarity that arrives only when someone's mask finally shatters in front of you and you see the whole person beneath it, unfiltered and undeniable. That night, I sat at my dining table with my laptop open, a folder of screenshots beside me, and a legal pad where I'd written out everything that had happened in the last 2 weeks. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I just felt done. Fully, completely done. The kind of done that doesn't wobble or second guess. I drafted one final message to David. Not to his phone, not to social media. To his email, the only line of communication I hadn't blocked yet. I told him not to contact me again, not to have friends or family contact me, not to show up at my home or workplace, and that any further contact would be considered harassment. I read it over once, twice, 3 times. It was calm. It was precise. It was the first boundary I set that wasn't up for debate. I clicked send. The silence that followed felt like a long exhale. 2 full days, without messages, without calls from unknown numbers, without emotional landmines exploding through my phone. I let myself believe for a moment that maybe he finally understood I was serious. Then, at 6:17 a.m. on the 3rd morning, I got an email from a new address. It was Lana. She told me that David was devastated that he couldn't sleep or eat, that I'd broken him because I lacked compassion. Compassion, the same word she'd clung to when she stood on my porch, acting like she had seniority in my relationship. Compassion, the weapon she used whenever she wanted to manipulate someone else into meeting her needs. I forwarded the email to my lawyer friend with a copy of the cease and desist message. He replied in less than 2 minutes telling me this was now harassment and to keep documenting everything. So I saved the email, timestamped it, and moved on with my day without replying. But when you take control away from someone who's used to having it, they don't disappear. They recruit. The first mutual friend to call me was Daniel, the same man who'd introduced me and David over a year ago. He sounded uncomfortable, like he already suspected he wasn't getting the truth, but felt obligated to relay whatever David had told him. He said David was crying, that I ended things because I was jealous he had female friends. I let him finish the script before I asked whether David mentioned that female friend was actually his ex-girlfriend of 4 years, whether he mentioned she tried to move into my house, whether he mentioned giving her my work email. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then he apologized genuinely and said he understood now. 2 more mutual friends reached out that week with their own versions of the story David had fed them. Each time, I calmly explained the full truth. Each time, their reactions were identical: shock, disbelief, and a slow, dawning horror that the man they thought they knew had conveniently edited out every damning detail. It didn't take long for word to spread. I didn't push anything. I didn't vent or rant or send evidence around. The truth simply had a way of leaking through the cracks David created himself. Then something unexpected happened. I received an email from David's father. A short one. Direct. He told me he'd spoken to David about boundaries, that he didn't agree with how his wife was handling things, and that he personally believed showing up at my workplace was completely inappropriate. He said he didn't understand why David thought moving his ex-girlfriend into my home was acceptable, and that I hadn't deserved any of it. His message was calm, almost weary, like he'd watched this pattern before. I thanked him. I meant it. Meanwhile, the fallout around David and Lana only got worse. It turned out Lana hadn't been kicked out by her roommate over a disagreement about dishes. She'd been thrown out because she'd dragged David into their conflicts, lied about money, disrupted the apartment dynamic, and weaponized emotional drama until no one could tolerate living with her. The story she told David was fiction. The story David repeated to me was fiction. But the real story, the one traveling quietly through our wider circle, painted a very different picture. And now, without my house as a lifeline, Lana had nowhere to go. David didn't either. Their reputations weren't doing them any favors. No one else was volunteering spare rooms or couches. No one wanted to get pulled into their mess. And so, after all the fighting and manipulation and accusations about my insecurities, the two of them ended up exactly where David swore they never would. Living together. Not in my house. Not in a spacious guest room, but in David's tiny studio apartment, 1 room, 1 bed, 1 bathroom, no privacy, nowhere to hide. It was almost poetic. A few nights later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was from David's best friend, the same one who'd called me to say I'd broken David, the same one who mocked me for being too dramatic. He told me he was sorry that he now saw the situation had always been strange, and admitted he never liked how much influence Lana had over David. He wrote that people were starting to realize the truth and that I'd dodged a massive bullet. For the first time, I let myself believe it. David's father emailed me once more. He said his daughter, meaning David, had made choices he couldn't defend, that I deserved better, and that he genuinely hoped I would find someone who valued me from the beginning, not after losing me. I read his message in my kitchen. While morning light poured across the floors, I refinished myself, and it hit me quiet and sure. I had spent months trying to be the understanding girlfriend, the flexible one, the unbothered one, the woman who never makes waves. I was so focused on being reasonable that I ignored every sign that David had been testing boundaries from the moment we met. Every heart emoji from Lana, every late-night call, every little mention of their history. Every time he watched my reaction instead of giving one. I wasn't insecure. I was patient. Too patient. And now the patience was gone. I wasn't grieving anymore. I wasn't angry. I was free. When the dust finally settled, the house felt different. Not empty, just quiet in a way that made sense. A quiet that felt like mine. I walked through the rooms one morning before work, coffee in hand, the early light washing across the renovated floors. The kitchen gleamed exactly how I'd imagined it, back when the place was just a sketch on a notepad. My tools were still stacked neatly in a corner, waiting for the next weekend project. And the guest room, the room David once suggested his ex-girlfriend could live in, had transformed completely. It wasn't a guest room anymore. I had repainted it in a soft shade of sage, installed floating shelves, added a walnut desk I found secondhand, and refinished myself. A slim reading lamp hung over the corner, illuminating the space just enough for late-night work sessions. It wasn't a bedroom for someone else. It was a room for me, my office, my sanctuary. The kind of room I would have never let myself create if I'd been preparing for someone else's comfort instead of my own peace. That realization lingered with me, how easily I had bent myself into shapes that made other people comfortable. How long I'd played the role of the cool girlfriend, the one who didn't make waves, who didn't question anything, who stayed calm, even when discomfort curled like smoke through the cracks of my relationship. I kept telling myself that being secure meant saying nothing, that maturity meant never calling out disrespect, that real love meant patience at all costs. The truth was quieter but sharper. Patience without boundaries isn't kindness, it's self-erasure. I learned that in therapy. I didn't go because I felt broken. I went because I didn't want to repeat patterns that left me shrinking inside my own life. My therapist was gentle but direct. She asked me questions I'd never asked myself. Why had I minimized the heart emojis from Lana? Why had I ignored the late-night phone calls he thought I didn't know about? Why did I brush off the little flinches, the discomfort I felt every time he mentioned her as if they were still sharing a life? The answer was simple but painful. I assumed good intentions even when there was evidence otherwise. I gave benefit of the doubt because I wanted to be understanding, not difficult. I thought if I stayed calm, understanding mature things would naturally sort themselves out. But they didn't. They got worse. Because people don't rise to the level of your patience. They sink to the depth of their own boundaries. And David's were non-existent. His relationship with Lana wasn't just a leftover friendship. It was a tether. He never cut a dynamic. He kept feeding a door he never fully closed. I saw the signs. I just didn't want to admit they meant something. One night after therapy, I sat in my living room with the lamp off, letting the glow from the kitchen spill across the floorboards. I thought about the last 14 months, the dinners, the shared weekends, the soft moments that felt real until they didn't. I thought about the look on David's face when I told him no. It wasn't hurt, it was disbelief. Like he couldn't understand a world where my boundaries mattered as much as his comfort. I didn't hate him. I didn't even resent him anymore. I just finally saw him clearly. Someone whose past had never truly ended. Someone who wanted me to adapt to a version of love that required me to take up less space. Someone who needed validation more than partnership. Letting go of him wasn't losing something. It was reclaiming something. I drove by his building once, not on purpose. I was cutting through a side street after groceries and happened to pass the small complex where he'd rented that cramped studio. The lights were on. For half a second, I wondered what the atmosphere inside felt like with both him and Lana living shoulder to shoulder in a space barely big enough for one person. I imagined the air, thick with unspoken tension, old resentments, the ghosts of a relationship neither of them had fully buried. And as quickly as the thought arrived, it left. What they were doing, what they were rebuilding or destroying or reliving. None of it had anything to do with me anymore. That freedom tasted clean, almost startling. I never realized how heavy their dynamic had been until it was no longer on my shoulders. Back at home, I sat at my new desk in my office, and opened my laptop. I wasn't working. Not really. I was planning. Sketching. Making lists for the garden I wanted to start in spring. Thinking about replacing the tile in the bathroom. Maybe taking a weekend trip alone for the first time in years. Everything on the page was grounded in one simple truth. This life is mine again. Sometimes you don't understand what you were settling for until you step outside of it. Sometimes you don't realize how tangled a situation was until you can breathe without someone else's expectations tightening around your ribs. And sometimes the thing you think you're losing is just the weight you needed to set down. I didn't want drama. I didn't want chaos. I wanted peace, clarity, a home built on something solid. I wanted a relationship where I wasn't competing with someone's past, where love wasn't measured against history I didn't belong to, where loyalty wasn't split between the person beside me